We are ready to continue, or actually, it was a perfect place to take this extended break because this book that we've been doing for quite a while now, The Theory and Practice of Universal Ethics, the Noahide Laws by Rabbi Dr. Shimon Dovid Cowen of Australia, has two parts to it. Part one is the theory, the philosophy, very philosophical. And part two, the practice of the universal ethics. So most of the book, of course, the greater portion of the book is part two, but we've completed part one. And then we had this extended break due to my going abroad to the Holy Land of Israel, and then Pesach, Passover, and now we're back. So that brings us to page 135. But before we begin to get today's lesson, I thought and I'm hoping that you would be somewhat interested in me sharing a little bit of my experience in the Holy Land. In truth, I can easily devote an entire class to that. And perhaps we will do that in a future class. But for today, I just would like to whet your appetite and just to mention or highlight a couple of the places or the experiences that I had, and maybe, as I say, we'll discuss it in more detail in a different class. In my life so far, I think I've been to Israel at least 15 times. Some of those times would be a stretch of maybe 6 months at a time when I was a student there. Ever since I was born, as a child, I went nearly every summer. My parents took me, and then the first time that I went alone was at age 9, when my parents didn't go or couldn't go. They sent me at any rate. And I went to school there for almost 2 years. And then there was a long gap of not having been there. And it changed a tremendous amount. I was there in 1980. And the next time I went was 1991 for the Persian Gulf War, for a quick visit, just to make the point that Israel is the safest place in the world and nothing to worry about, and the eyes of Hashem, the eyes of God are on the land, and was a quick in and out visit. At any rate, this visit, which I went because, thank God, we married off a son in Israel. The wedding took place in the village of Kfar Chabad. That's one story for itself. I remember it was truly a village. And now it's pretty big and bustling. I remember the days where they literally had no street names and addresses. You sent a letter, you put the person's name, and you wrote Kfar Chabad. And now they have, every street has a name, and there's neighborhoods and addresses, etc., etc. A lot to speak about Kfar Chabad. We went to places where I've never been, at least not that I recall or that I know of. For example, we went to the city of Shiloh, which of course, we all know that as a biblical place, because that is where the Mishkan, the tabernacle, stood for some 369 years. It's a long time for a Mishkan. And we were at the exact spot which they claim and believe to be the exact spot of the Mishkan, where the original tabernacle in Shiloh was. We also went down to hilltops, where there's a lot of conflict going on over there, where you have individuals, youngsters, that live there alone as shepherds, Jewish guys from like age 14 even, and up to into their teens, and each place has a couple, like 3, 4, 5 of these guys with lots of sheep, and it's a way to make a stronghold, and then after a while they end up being able to make a settlement there. Unfortunately, when right the day after we were in one of these places, one of these kids was actually in a very cruel way murdered by the Arabs there. So we were in a lot of these places. We were in a very interesting settlement, and in Shiloh went to see the red heifers that some are preparing for the third temple with the coming of Mashiach, when the Jewish people are going to need to have the 10th and final red heifer to purify us. And in a certain way, amongst many other places, and this was like on the spur of a moment, it wasn't planned or scheduled by us, I ended up going to the exact location, Nova, where a massacre is an understatement. I don't have a proper word to describe what happened on October 7th. So I went to that exact location, and I was completely emotionally overwhelmed. I wasn't ready for it. And they have a lot of visitors that come there now, and they planted a lot of trees there. And each place where they planted a tree, they have a little marker with a person's name and their picture. So in a certain way, it looks like a big cemetery, even though none of them are actually buried there, of course. And it worked out, happened to work out by divine providence, that day that I was there, a number of people that escaped and were survivors from this undescribable, unimaginable situation came back for the first time to kind of have closure or whatever it was. And you're talking, this is about 5 months after it happened. And I was so emotional. I could not contain my feelings. We said some prayers by one particular place. I can go into a lot of detail about that particular thing. And there's a Lubavitcher, a chassid, who's there all the time, every day, with of course, one of the things that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach has, we have these big caravans that go all over the place, in Israel, all over, in New York, and many other places, where it's a think against assimilation, and we bring the message of the mitzvahs and the Noach commandments, and most importantly, of the coming of Mashiach. So there's one of those huge tanks right there, and the guy is there putting on tefillin with people, because there's always people coming there every day. After doing that for a little while, and praying the afternoon prayer over there with a quorum, I simply needed to kind of like get away, and I started towards the area or as you pronounce it in English, Gaza. And I just started walking there in that direction, and I was like, I felt I just want to go into Gaza, just, to kill, and if God forbid, to be killed. It was like very, very emotional. And I started walking. I went pretty deep into that direction. And afterwards, I found out that it was the right direction, but I wouldn't have been able to get in. I would have been stopped beforehand. And it was very, very emotional. And I almost lost my way back. I mean, it wasn't too simple to get back, but I got back, and then I continued, doing all the things, encouraging all the people there and putting on filling with people and other things like that. And it was actually, there was a busload of maybe some, give or take, about 20 people that came, that were escaped. Each one is a book for itself. Anyway, that's just a little bit of my visit there, and that visit impacted me very, very strongly beginning with emotions, but even then afterwards, when I was able to kind of process or intellectually digest that, it strengthened my opinion or my feeling. I would say maybe a little bit more of an extremist than I was before. My anti-terrorists, anti-Palestinians. It just, if I thought that I had, so to say, a hard line opinion beforehand, it showed me that no, this is more. And I really have no tolerance and no sympathy for any of the Arabs that live in Gaza. But let's suffice with that. And again, I can elaborate and we can have discussions. And each one of those points that I spoke about, I can really elaborate. And it's just incredible how you see the hand of Hashem so clearly. And of course, how can I not mention? I'm sorry. So we were there. Forgive me, I didn't look up. I don't remember the regular secular date, but the wedding was on Tuesday. I think it was April 10th. And we stayed on for another week. That following Saturday night, we were in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. And in the middle of the night, between 2 and 3, about 2:30-ish, was when the sirens went off, the alarm, and everyone was supposed to go into a safe room, whatever that means. And that's when the Iranian maniac was shooting, I don't know how many missiles, hundreds, whatever it was, tremendous amount. And I merited to live through, the miracles beyond nature. So it's just incredible. You speak about miracles, and in the month of Nisan, and right before Passover, and these, I strongly believe, are part of the miracles of the future redemption, meaning to say we're in the future. It's a little disappointing that this Passover just passed over and we're still in exile, but we're still in the month of Nisan. Here in Chicago, tonight is the 25th of Nisan. So we're still extremely excited and hopeful that it's happening immediately, surely in this month of Nisan. All right, having said that, page 135. So this is part 2. Yes?
I thought you, forgive me, that was, I'm sorry, Rabbi. I just thought that you were like, well, what is everyone would like to do? Talk about the last month's experience or start the lesson? So I apologize. I was just wondering what everybody.
No problem.
Because these are very, these events in the last month, with all due respect, sir, and you have a keen understanding. And my apologies to our Australian guests. I was just wondering what their thoughts were. Real quick, and then you can continue the lesson, if you would, because it's not very often that these events happen, And I have so few to talk to besides you. So if you'd indulge me, sir, thank you.
I think we will devote at least one whole class to, I can elaborate more, and then we can have discussion and so forth. But for now, let's get back to our schedule, and it's part 2, so it's chapter 6. Again, as I said, that was just to whet your appetite. Okay, so now we're getting to the practice of the universal ethics, known as the 7 Noahide commandments. Before we begin inside anything, we're going to see this, and there are a lot of very important footnotes that I would want to do with you as well. Let me just say, he's going to mention it in detail, but let me just put it out there so we can, in simple language. Although the number we always say is 7, 7 Noahide commandments for all of mankind, for all the nations, all 70 nations, except for the Jews. There are 7 commandments. By now, we all are very well familiar that there's really much more than 7. So there's the general idea of making the world a civilized, settled, functioning world. And that is sort of the intent of the Noahide commandments. And then there's the actual do's and more so the don'ts of the Noahide commandments. But again, there's that overarching general intent of the purpose. And then we're going to see how that applies practically. All right, so let us see, without any further ado, chapter 6, Introduction, Civilization and Sinai. Overview. A, civilization and rationality. Technical aspect of rationality. The moral dimensions of rationality. The divine tutoring of reason. Okay? Well, he's going to spell it out, but let me just mention human beings, the way we were created, the way our minds work, the way we're wired, is there's logic, there's rationale. Certain things make sense, certain things don't. And that alone, without bringing in the divine plan, God's commandments, is not only insufficient, but can actually be destructive. And without elaborating yet, I'm just going to mention from recent history, most recent history, one generation ago, still people that are from that time, there was one country that was, or prided itself to be the most advanced country in the world, intellectually, morally, etc. And they became the worst destructive Germany of the Holocaust of World War II. B, Sinai and rationality. The revelation at Sinai, Noahide laws and the rational aspect of revelation. C, Noahide law. The content of the 7 Noahide laws, residual Noahide law based on rationality. D, society in ascent. The criteria of ascending rationality. The conditions of ascending rationality, the order of Noahide law. All right, that was the overview. And now we're going to see, which is very good because Shavuos is coming up, as now is the time of the counting of the Omer. For those that are familiar with that, and those that are not, I'm not going to explain it at this point. Basically, on some level, we're counting the days for the festival of Shavuos, which marks the day of the revelation at Sinai when God gave the Torah. And that is on the 6th of the Hebrew month of Sivan, in about another 5 weeks. So we're now preparing from the Exodus of Egypt, from Pesach, Passover, until Shavuos. We're in the mode of preparing for that day. So this is a very, very appropriate chapter and section to study. Okay, bottom page 135. A, civilization and rationality. The technical aspect of rationality. The most basic sense of civilization is that of the peaceful habitation of the world. Let's see real quickly the footnote. The words for that in the term of the prophet is Yeshuvoi Shel Olam, or actually that's the words of the Talmudic sages based on the verse in the prophets. Yishuvoi shaloilam. Literally, this means the settling of the world, but also connotes the peaceful and harmonious habitation of the world. See the elaboration of this term as the basic intent of the Noachide laws in the works of the Rabbi Melech HaMashiach, and he mentions over here 2 places in the Likutei Sichos, the official edited talks of the Rabbi Melech HaMashiach, volume 5 and volume 39. Okay, so that's one thing, to make this world peaceful, proper, functioning, good world. The distinctively human way of achieving this has been through reason or rationality. Initially, reasons applied to the cultivation and utilization of nature. Crops must be grown, clothing made, dwellings constructed, and the energies of nature drawn into productive technologies. All right, can't argue with that. Human rationality is able to devise and calculate means of managing nature quite unlike the way the animals survive in it. So we're not just the highest form of animals. The human being commands nature not by superior strength or other animal powers, but through reason's science. Okay, that's science. Science began as the knowledge of the use of simple tools. It became increasingly theoretical and was powerfully applied to every domain of human existence. It is employed not only in the encounter with physical nature, but also in the study of the human being as a psychological person, in social organizations, and in forms of abstract reflection such as art and philosophy. All these are science. All of these domains of science have an instrumental dimension in that they deliver results, be it a reorientation of personality, a crop, a successful organization, or an artwork. So pretty much everybody appreciates science. We use science, and science has developed, as he just explained. There is a more primary technical aspect of collective or socialized human activity, which we find in the culture, character of individual societies. A society has a temperament expressed through typical thought styles, a language with characteristic idioms and features of national character, and forms of social and administrative practice. All of these are independent of and prior to the values they come to serve. The one and the same culture could express the most diverse values, as did East Germany, as it was once called, which within a short period was democratic, right, Germany, fascist, communist, and democratic again. Interesting. The primary culture temperament expressed through the instruments of thought, language, and folkways, themselves undergoing modification over time, constitute the basic identity of the society through its technical and moral history. Let's see footnote 2. When we said that the primary technical thing, in the sense of constituting a general vessel or vehicle for a society's activities, forms of expression, and ways of doing things, as discussed in the following. The word temperament here, as culture and linguistic character, signifies something more comprehensive than the group temperaments of different movements or factions within a society. He's just clarifying what he means when he says temperaments. Okay, so now we mentioned Germany. Okay? The moral dimension of rationality. The ability, technically, to command nature is only part of the biblical mandate given to the human to fill the earth and subdue it. Okay? Those are the words, it's translation of the words in the Bible, chapter 1, where it says to fill the world and to conquer it, to subdue it, as he translates here. So in other words, the human being was given right at the beginning this mandate of taking over the world. The complete sense of this mandate is to elevate it to a moral and then a spiritual ideal. Thus, technical rationality is necessary, but insufficient to define civilization. A society priding itself in the highest technical rationality of history to its day, interwar Germany, carried out under Nazism the worst atrocity in history. I just mentioned that before. And here, they were priding themselves as being the greatest, rationally, intellectually, in all the sciences and arts, and morally. Without definable moral standards, a society's technical advance can be also a cause for anxiety in the event of its misuse. Whatever the level of development of its technical rationality, a crucial standard for civilization is the values which its technical capability is made to serve. That's crucial. This more comprehensive concept of rationality is thus its extension to the idea of a moral or social technical ordering of the world. This complete sense of a human mandate to fill and subdue in turn needs and in fact has as a divine mandate and summons a substantive guide and criterion in the form of divine values for that moral or social ordering. So you can't just take those words in the Torah and the Bible that says, oh, fill the earth and subdue it. That means we're in charge. And that means, no, that's part of it. But it's with a goal, with an intention over here. You need to have the proper values, the divine values. An eternal God has an eternal ethical will, an unchanging moral template for his creation. You got that? If you're highlighting anything, if you're underlining anything, I think that line and a half would be such. Let's read it again. An eternal God has an eternal ethical will, an unchanging moral template for his creation. God doesn't change, neither does his ultimate will. Page 138. The divine tutoring of reason. Okay, so now that we've logically explained that you can't just have rationale, etc., but you have to have the divine plan. The question of whether there are objective, enduring universal values, and if so, what these are, go together. In other words, whether there is such a thing and what they are, those two questions really go together. Meaning, one is tempted to find guidance in this matter by going to the question, what norms do we in fact find have been continuous or salient throughout the history of humanity? I mean, here we are, thousands of years later, according to our belief. So let's take a look. We have enough history to look at. Which values have proven most durable in the face of all kinds of social challenges? Indeed, one does find certain convergence amongst the great religiously based cultures. At the same time, however, the record of history is not necessarily the recommended reference place for morality. There has been much enduring with horrifically intensified moments of moral darkness. And we look back at certain points in history and we wonder, how could this be? Nevertheless, common and historically enduring and recurring values do point to a common resonance, a common spiritual root, consciousness from which these common values with their individual variations proceed. The answers come in response to the question of the divine mandate itself. Why and for what purpose did God create the world and give them being a unique agency in it? Very, very basic, philosophical, religious question. Why did God create the world? What does he want? And he gave us our ability and our mandate. As far as humanity is concerned, it was in order to model the creation on divine values. These values are to be found in the resonance of two objectives: God and the human soul made by the biblical testimony in the image of God. The concept of universal ethical values, or a common human consciousness, spiritual consciousness, is related to the biblical notion of the ability of the human being to imitate God. The values of the common conscious or soul in the human being are universal and eternal because they imitate the one God who fashioned in the human soul and replicated in it his own unique set of attributes. These divine attributes are godly ways which translate into concrete norms of human conduct, namely those set out in the Noahide laws. When the human being transcends towards God, rising above mere personal, emotional, or mental biases and interests, this common conscious or soul is revealed. But it needs also to be educated and trained in the tradition which articulates these values. No, you can't just guess, but we have to go by the book. And that is going to reveal, or better yet, focus and educate those attributes. There are 7 emotive character traits that we have. These divine norms or values can also wear the title of rationality because they have created and defined what for humanity is authentic rationality. This concept is expressed by one of the great codifiers of the biblical tradition, who states that although the Noahide laws have a rational character, right, they all make sense, and intellect inclines towards them, they are nevertheless learned from divine revelation. Hey, he's referring to Maimonides over here. So it's not good enough to say, don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, etc. I don't need religion for that. You do. That is to say, the truly rational contour of reason has been taught by God. The character of the Noahide laws is that they make sense. They are assimilable to reason, but they are God-given. This concept of rationality applies equally to the divine laws which govern private conduct between the individual person and God, as to those which govern public conduct between person and person. And so also the ethical human relationship with nature. So it's all because God said so. Thus, while the human being is fitted with a soul, a divine receptor, this alone does not fully prepare one to discover by him or herself the structure and detail of divine law. So you can't just leave it up to your gut feeling or your soul is going to lead you in the right path. It doesn't work like that. Top of 140. Rather, this law was received from God by revelation, which was then historically transmitted with its elucidation or commentary from Sinai. The primary significance of the human soul is that it is able to receive, resonate with, and thereby confirm this divine law, communicated to it by tradition, which originates definitively at Sinai. There is a considerable diversity amongst traditions and societies in their substantive laws and customs. This is intrinsically valuable, so long as it is not in contradiction to the common and universal moral ground, the shared imitation of God expressed in the laws of Noah, in the Noahide laws. So yeah, you can have differences, and you can have different ways and different customs, different, as long as all conforms and it's within this framework. Once you're out of bounds, nope, that's not part of who you are. That's not part of your mandate and your mission, and no rights. The fact of human difference needs no defense and will always assert itself. That's fine. What requires definition, defense, and assertion is the common ground, stated in the primordial moral covenant of God and humanity in the Noahide laws, with its fundamental reiteration at Sinai. It was the revelation at Sinai that made known and gave definitive form and authority to the Noahide laws, in which humanity was already commanded before Sinai. So that's a whole discussion for itself. But basically, even though God gave 6 commandments to Adam, the first man, Adam, and then he reiterated them to Noah and added a 7th. However, depending exactly how you want to explain it and which midrash, which explanation or which commentary you want to take, basically it's fair to say that the Noahide today, just like the Jew, need not, he's not required and obligated to keep all of his laws because they were given to Adam or to Noach or to anybody else. It's only because they were reiterated, if we could put it that way, by the giving of the Torah, the revelation of Sinai. That's what makes it obligatory. Okay, the more details to it, but that's the basic point. And just like there are certain commandments in the book of Genesis for the Jew, such as circumcision, or not to eat a certain part of a kosher animal, and others, that's not what makes it obligatory. That's not why the Jew is obligated to do those things. It's because God said it and reiterated it and gave it by Sinai. Same thing with the 7 Noahide commandments. Okay. This is a good point to stop at. So we're up to the bottom of 140, where we're going to discuss more about what exactly happened at the revelation of Sinai and what we believe and what mistake some of the other most popular religions make. So we're going to be talking more about Sinai and the revelation at Sinai. But now we're going to open up for questions, comments, or whatnot. Please. No one has anything to say or add or ask? We can continue.
James.
Which one?
Go
ahead, James.
Hi, Rabbi Turin. Glad you're back safe. I hope you had a good Pesach. I've been doing some research on the word olam and ha'olam, and
I'm sorry. When you say olam, could you give us the context?
Rashi, the umot ha'olam and Hasidei umot ha'olam, and just ha'olam in general. And there's commentary by Rashi on Shmos 3:15. He says, don't read it ha'olam, but read it helem, which means to the concealment. And also a rabbi, oh my goodness, I forget his name, a blessed memory, from Toronto. He's originally from Europe.
Rabbi Jacob Manuel Shochet.
Shochet, very good, thank you. He wrote some commentary in the Hasidus Heritage series on the 4 worlds, and he mentioned the same thing. And this really blew me away, and I've been studying this the past few months. You have the Umot Ha'olam and you have the Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, and this concealment by the nations and the peoples of the world, I should say. And then we have this Toshav, these residing of the world, trying to make it a civilized world, right? And the connection between the Sheva mitzvahs and also Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, which is the Rambam talks about. This is really profound to me. Like, do you know of anything more? Can you elaborate on the word olam, and then of course the settling of the world? Like, anything comes to mind. I love it. Like,
well,
not only that, but coming out of that concealment, right? Because the Hasidei Umot Ha'olam are like, it seems to me like they're right on the cusp. Like they see it through the Noga, and there's the Klipat Noga and all that. Like, I'm fascinated by this.
Okay, so without any research or preparation, so to say, just off the cuff, Hasidus does speak a great deal about that word and the concept. So just for everybody, in case you didn't get it, James is talking about a particular word in Lashon HaKodesh, in the original biblical Hebrew, and the word is oilam, which is spelled ayin, almost always followed by vav, which is actually a vowel, not a letter in this case, lamed mem. So the root of it would be ayin lamed mem, those three letters. And in languages in general, but surely in the holy tongue, in the biblical Hebrew, every single nuance is very exact and precise, because this is God's language. It's not man-made. So if you have, I guess in English that would be called a synonym, when you have one word that means, no, that's two words that mean the same thing. And what's it called when you have one word that has different meanings? Another minute.
Antonym? No. Is it an antonym?
When one word means two different things, like there, and there, or two and two. Is that an antonym? The different spellings, but the same word? Anyway, if you have a word that has different meanings, they must be closely connected and associated one with the other. Now, the word oilam, the way that it's commonly used, has a couple of meanings. Without putting it into context, just taking that word by itself and asking a 5-year-old child who that's his language, that's what he knows. His first language he knows is biblical Hebrew. Ask him to translate the word oilam. He will probably say world. Oilam translates as world. Okay? Put that on the side. Point one. What else does the word oilam mean? The word oilam means forever. Forever. You'd really say li oilam, you'd add a lamed, a prefix to it, which is saying for or to, not the world. That makes no sense to translate it as such, but it means forever. So the prefix there is for or to, and then the word oilam translates as forever. And if you want to emphasize it, you would say la'olam va'ed. What does va'ed mean? Well, you have three words, or more actually. Netzach, Sela, and Va'ed. But we're not going to go on that. That's a whole sidetrack. Va'ed means forever. So when you say La'olam Va'ed, it's a matter of emphasis. Now, so we have two definitions for the word oilam. World, as in space, and forever, as in eternal time. Also, it means concealment, which is the point James was making. The word for concealment is helem. The root is same letters, Ayin Lamed Mem. That means concealment. Now, when we refer to God, one of the descriptions we give is Melech Ha'olam. In every blessing we say Baruch, blessed, Atah you, then we say his name, Elokeinu, our God, Melech Ha'olam, King of the universe, of the world. So he's called the King of the world. And why is it that world and concealment are the same word? So again, there's lots to explain, but very, very briefly and basically, the world serves as a concealment over the absolute truth. The absolute truth is all that exists is God and God alone. The world that he created is a facade and conceals the truth that he's the only existence. Okay. What's our job? What do we do? Our mission is to remove that concealment. Now, the nations of the world can describe them in many ways, give a lot. So one way is Umay Sa'ilam, which means the people of the world, of Olam. And even the finer people, the highest form of the people of the non-Jews, Hasidei Umay Sa'ilam. So they're still part of this concealment. And we're supposed to reveal that. And by doing so, you kind of give it a spin, and then it becomes, you reveal the eternity of God. And that's just to conclude the two verses that we say, that we start off the Shema. The first one, traditionally, the Jewish people cover their eyes when they say it. And we say the verse, one of the most basic tenets of all of Judaism, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Listen, hear, Yisrael. God is our God. God is one, meaning one and only. And then you uncover your eyes and you see a world in front of you. So then, in a hush, in a whisper, you say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingship, Le'olam va'ed, forever, again using that word olam. But again, it would be a whole discussion, but it's very interesting that you have over there that point of olam. There's a lot more to say about it, a lot more.
Rabbi Tutoring, can you tell me again in Hebrew what the word king of the world means in Hebrew?
Melech ha'olam.
Melech?
Melech, Mem Lamed, or Melech. That's the first word.
Yeah.
And the other one is Ha'olam, Hey, Ayin, Vav, Lamed, final Mem, or H, A,
Yeah.
Olam. King of the world.
Oh, yeah. Melech Ha'olam.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, man. Thank you, Rabbi Turn. I really appreciate it. Homonym, I think.
It's brought down. There's a midrash that says that when Noah came out of the ark after the great flood and the story was over, now he, emerges out of the ark. It says, Olam Chadash Ra'ah, which literally translated means a new world he saw. But he uses the word Olam there again.
That's awesome. There's something to. Oh, sorry, Ward.
Carry on.
I think there's something. I've had a little bit of a chidush where I think there's something connected to non-Jews who have, I shouldn't have, but they're going to want to declare Hashem as king of the world. And I think that's like a code. That is a thing. It's bringing them out of the nations. I think that's what it is. But it's a chidush I'm working on. Homonym, I think, is the word we were thinking of. Homonym. I think it's a homonym.
I think that's an homonym. Yeah. One word means different things.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Turn. I firmly believe the Geula is here. I think we're in it. I think we're working on it. I really do.
Absolutely.
I have a question. Okay, within these laws, we have certain things that are mitzvah, but we also, for the sake of civilization, we're talking about rationality in that we're talking about the ethics in that we have what's called straight conduct, and that seems to be a totally separate set of rules and regulations that we live our lives by that don't necessarily correspond directly to the mitzvah, although we often join them up, such as let's say returning lost property. The non-Jew does not have a mitzvah to return lost property, but we probably should be nice and for the sake of civilization to return lost property. So if we don't learn that from the mitzvah, the straight conduct, where do we learn that from? That coming from God.
Okay. Did everyone understand the question? To reiterate, if we're making this kind of split, and there's the technical mitzvahs, commandments, the laws, and then there's this general, lovey-dovey, good, proper, upright feeling, and we're saying that everything has to go back to the divine, to Hashem, not just what we rationalize. So how does that fit? Right? Okay. So as we said, he used the word intent. I think that's a good word. In the footnote 1 on page 135, this idea of Yeshuvah Shel Olam is the basic intent of the law. So what I'm about to tell you now is not actually accurate, but for the sake of explaining it, I want to use that sort of as a comparison. For the Jew, there are, as we're going to discuss, 613 commandments. Everybody knows that. Everybody agrees, 613. And for the most part, everybody agrees on what they are. I mean, there's arguments, but basically, there's 613 commandments, and that everybody agrees. The 613 are all referred to in the Chumash, in the written law, in the Bible. And they're all explained in the oral tradition, the Talmud, etc. Rashi, in his commentary, brings down from one of the greats who preceded him, one of the Geonim of that era, which explains that in the 10 commandments that we discussed earlier, and that we know that's like the basic of the basic, that's like, and even though people make a mistake, but it's not so terrible, and they say that, the whole world has to keep the 10 commandments, and all the nations of the world, and we said in courts, you see over there the 10 commandments in the United States and in other places, which is good. That's a good thing, even though it's not accurate, because the 10 commandments include keeping Shabbos, and that's only for the Jews, but the general idea they got. In the 10 commandments, how many letters are there? Letters, not words. In the Bible, if you were to open up the book of Exodus, chapter 19, and you were to count the words from the first word, Anoichi, when God introduces himself and says, I am, that's the first word, and count the letters, Anoichi, Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud, that's 4. And then it says God's tetragrammaton name, Yud, K, Vav, K, another 4. And then Elikecha, Asher, read, Hoitzei Sicha, and go on like that. Count the letters in the 10 commandments. How many letters are there? Any guess? Unless you know.
600.
Anybody? Go ahead, guess. Very good. I believe you knew that. That wasn't a guess, right?
Sorry. I waited.
That's fine. If you were guessing, you would have said 613.
Lucky guess.
Right. There,
What's the answer?
there are six.
How many letters?
What was that?
What's the answer?
620.
6.
620.
620.
Now,
Oh, yeah.
the 620. 620, yes. Now, he explains that actually every one of the 613 commandments plus, and there's two explanations here. Some say it's the 7 rabbinic laws, but for our sake, let's say it's the 7 Noahide commandments. The problem with saying 7 Noahide commandments is that they overlap, so they're included. But be that as it may, every mitzvah, every God-given commandment is hinted to, or is latched onto, or is enrooted in one of the letters of these 10 commandments, as they're known. Now, can a human being figure out, without divine inspiration or some holy prophetic vision of some sort, what they are? I don't think so. But is it random? Just go in order, this order, that order, go in chronological order? I mean, there's 620 rather, letters. So just as those letters, each one actually is truly the spiritual root of one of the commandments, and every one of the commandments, like some of the commandments are like, trying to think of a unusual type of a mitzvah. There's so many of them that, not the regular ones.
Netaravoy.
That's not all. Netaravoy. Okay, Netaravoy basically means that the 4th year of the tree, the produce is to be redeemed in order to eat it, or eat it in Jerusalem, whatever. Okay. You chose that because I understand, because the Bnei Noach are. So anyhow, every single mitzvah is not just hinted to, but truly has its root in one of those letters. I would say it's similar. L'sheves Yitzara, the making the world a better world and doing what's morally correct, even though technically you can't quote me chapter and verse where you must return the stolen article, but it is enrooted in this mitzvah. Let's just say, I'm not 100% sure without looking it up, but just thinking, let's just say that the idea of a Noahide going above the letter of the law and returning a lost article, even though he's not obligated to, the Jew is obligated to, the Noahide is not, but he does it, that would be going above the letter of the law of which commandment? Of not to steal. As you can understand logically where I'm going with that. You didn't steal it. Here's somebody's property. It was lost. And you can find the owner. And you don't have an obligation to pick it up and to try to find the owner. Unlike a Jew who sees something which belongs to a fellow Jew, he must. It's a positive and a negative commandment. He must, and he's not allowed to ignore it. A Noahide, who's not obligated to do that, but if he wants to go within the spirit of the law or above the letter of the law, it's very commendable for him to do that. So it's kind of enrooted in there. So again, especially if you're a person who's very rigid and very black and white, so it's like harder to know. Okay, so where do I make my borders? You want it to be more solid than fluid. Someone who's naturally very fluid, so they can appreciate this kind, but then they also have to know that there are borders. Basically, the way our nature is, we're different, and you always have to try to go against your nature in a good way. For those people that are very rigid and abide by the law, what's the challenge to them is to be more fluid and go along with the spirit. For people that are by nature very floaty and called spiritual and are very fluid, so for them the challenge is abide by the law. These are the rules. This is where it starts, this is where it ends. But so it's a combination of both.
James Gusto.
James.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. My fault. Is this the concept? And Bob, this might actually be a question for you because I'm very curious about this as well. Lo mitzuvah va'ose and mitzuvah va'ose, not commanded and does, and commanded and does. And how does that apply to a non-Jew? For instance, there's probably some things, obviously, that a non-Jew shouldn't do, even as not commanded and does. Or maybe I'm not even reading that right. But Bob, for you, I'd be very interested if you get into any classes exterior to this one on that concept too. I would be keen to be a part of that if I could.
Yeah, we were reviewing that with a class that we're studying in the Divine Code. It's a study group, but we're yeah, it's there seems to be a concept of straight conduct that also exists within the Jewish halakha, and I'm just wondering how those relate to each other. It's a big area that's
right. It's a bigger scope, I think, than just my simple question.
See, the verse that says Vasisa toiv hayashar, that you are to do that which is good and just, is in the Jewish law, is actually obligatory. And in a court of law, in a Beis Din, where they're not trying to make a compromise, but they want to go, the two litigants are demanding the ruling according to the letter of the law. Even then, based on that verse, there are many laws which would apply.
The other James has his hand up.
Other James?
Hey, James Buchanan, you're muted. If you want to talk, you got to unmute.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. It's always blows me away with the level of conversation. So I appreciate it, everyone, to be included. And I want to step back for just my understanding. I know with the county, if I may, with the county, the Omer, it's like the different levels, 7 times 7. So it does have the Sephirot involved. When the temple's rebuilt and the nations are allowed to bring sacrifices, it's going to be, and if I understand the days, it's like smaller. Rather than 7 times 7, it's just the 7. Because the Jews had to go through that purification before they could teach the rest of the world on Sukkot. And that's what gets carried on. So your comments, anyone's comments. Thank you.
Anyone? So it's a good point. And if I can sort of rephrase that, counting the Omer is 7 times 7. We have 7 weeks that we count, and every day we count a day. 49 in total. That is a mitzvah for the Jew. the Jew is counting 7 weeks, which is the 7 midos, the 7 character traits, each one comprised of all 7. So that's very detailed. And it's not just counting, but we're working on changing, taming, redeeming that particular trait. After all that work of 7 weeks, of 49 days, now the Jew is ready to receive the Torah. And when God gives the Torah, that's where he's giving the 7 Ohad commandments as well. So it's the 7 commandments for the 70 nations of the world. So that's how it works. You know, we go through the detail to get to these 7 general ones. So that's 7, very, very general. But for who? For all 70 nations. And the 70 nations is the way all of these 7 are comprised of all 10. The 10 includes the intellect. Not only the 7 attributes, but it's also the Chachma Bina Das, the intellect. So 70 is really a full picture. It's each one of the 7, but even more than 7 times 7, which is 49, 7 times 10. All right. Looks like we're on for next week. And that leaves us at the bottom of page 140, Sinai and Rationality. All right, as always, it's been a pleasure. Wishing you all the best and truly hoping that way before next class will already be deep into the complete and true Geula, redemption.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Taron, for your teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Goodbye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good week.
Thank you. See you,
Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.